This story is titled, My Wife Chose to Believe Her Toxic Best Friend's Lies. Instead of me, it destroyed our marriage until the truth was revealed. Looking back, the warning signs had always been there. Love has a way of blinding you, making you believe that things will work out, that people will change. But some people don't change. They just get better at hiding their true nature. When Emma and I met, everything clicked. She had this warmth, this way of making even the most ordinary moments feel special. It didn't take long before we moved in together, and a couple of years later I proposed. It felt right. It felt like the next step in a future we were both excited about. But there was always a third presence in our relationship, someone who never quite let go of her grip on Emma, Stacy. From the first time I met her, something felt off. She carried herself like she owned every room she walked into, always demanding attention, always steering the conversation. The way she looked at me, it wasn't curiosity or friendliness. It was like she was assessing me, waiting for me to slip up, to give her something she could use. Emma and Stacy had been inseparable since college, the kind of friendship built on years of late-night talks, drunken confessions, and being each other's safety net. Emma always spoke about how Stacy had been there through heartbreaks, through family struggles, through every moment of doubt. It was clear she felt a debt to Stacy, a kind of loyalty that overrode reason. At first, I tried to play along. It was important to Emma, so I wanted to respect that. But the longer I was around Stacy, the clearer it became that she didn't see me as Emma's partner. She saw me as competition. The little remarks, the exaggerated sighs when I joined them for dinner, the way she made plans for Emma without ever acknowledging me. Every time I brought it up, Emma brushed it aside, saying Stacy just had a strong personality, that she didn't mean any harm. The signs only became clearer when we moved in together. What should have been an exciting new chapter for us felt like a test, one where Stacy kept finding new ways to wedge herself into our space. She had no problem showing up unannounced, sprawling on our couch like she had every right to be there. If I made dinner for Emma and me, Stacy conveniently dropped by, complaining about how hungry she was, how she'd had a long day, how Emma would never let her starve. One night, after Stacy left, I finally brought it up, asking if maybe we could have more nights that were just for us. Emma stiffened, her arms crossing in a way that told me she had already made up her mind. She didn't see a problem. Stacy had been in her life for years, long before me, and she wasn't going to push her aside just because I felt uncomfortable. It wasn't just about spending time together. It was about boundaries, boundaries Stacy refused to respect. She had no issue rummaging through our fridge, making herself at home, offering unsolicited advice on everything from our grocery choices to the way we decorated. One time she held up a bottle of dressing and scoffed, saying she expected Emma to eat healthier now that they were sharing a space. I laughed it off. But it stuck with me. She was testing her limits, seeing what she could get away with. The worst part was that Emma always excused it. If I pointed out how Stacy seemed to be everywhere, Emma just sighed, saying Stacy was going through a tough time, that she didn't have many other friends, that she just needed support. It was a cycle. Stacy overstepped. I voiced concern. Emma defended her. Over and over again. It didn't stop there. Every milestone in our relationship came with resistance from Stacy. When we planned a weekend getaway, Emma hesitated at the last minute, saying Stacy had just gone through a breakup and didn't want to be alone. The idea of canceling flickered in her eyes, but I put my foot down that time. We went, but I could tell Emma felt guilty, checking her phone constantly, reading texts from Stacy about how miserable she was, how she wished she had what Emma and I had. That was the first time I truly felt like I was losing. Stacy knew exactly how to play the game. She never outright told Emma I was a problem. Instead, she planted seeds, made little comments about how fast everything was moving, about how Emma never used to miss their Friday night hangouts, about how relationships could change people in ways they didn't realize. Slowly, quietly, she turned what should have been a happy time into something that felt like a tug of war. Emma never saw it. Or maybe she did, but she didn't want to admit it. When I finally said that Stacy needed to give us space, that this wasn't normal, that no healthy relationship had a third person dictating its terms, Emma's face darkened. She told me Stacy wasn't dictating anything, that she was just a concerned friend looking out for her. The way she said it, the way she looked at me, it wasn't anger. It was doubt, a crack forming in something I thought was solid. And Stacy? She saw it too. I could tell by the way she smiled the next time she visited, by the way she looked at me like she knew she'd won something I didn't even realize was a battle. I should have walked away then, but I didn't. I still believed I could fix it. That was my biggest mistake. Proposing to Emma had been one of the easiest decisions of my life. The way she looked at me when I asked, The way she practically tackled me in excitement. It had felt right. Perfect, even. But perfection doesn't last when someone else is determined to ruin it. Stacy had been quick to insert herself into every aspect of our wedding planning. It started small, little suggestions here and there, things I brushed off because I wanted Emma to be happy. The color scheme wasn't good enough. The catering needed more options. The venue was too traditional. At first, it seemed like harmless input, like she was just trying to help. But then the demands started. She wanted a special moment during the ceremony, ahead of the bridesmaids. Her reasoning? She had been there through every one of Emma's breakups, every heartbreak, every struggle. The wedding wasn't just about celebrating love. It was about celebrating the people who had supported Emma along the way. I'd thought it was a joke at first. No one seriously asked to have their own walk down the aisle at someone else's wedding, right? But Emma hesitated when I pushed back. She wasn't thrilled with the idea, but she didn't want to fight Stacy on it. She kept saying it was just a small thing, not worth the drama. That was when I realized something. Emma wasn't in control. On our wedding day, Stacy strutted down the aisle like she was the star of the show. The way she held her head high, the smirk she shot in my direction, the satisfied little glance she gave Emma. I could see it all so clearly now. She wasn't just a friend celebrating with us. She was staking her claim. My parents exchanged awkward glances. My best man whispered a stunned, "What the hell?" under his breath, but I just smiled for the photos. What else could I do? This was Emma's best friend, and if I made a scene, I'd be the villain. So I let it go. I thought things would get better once we were married, that Stacy would step back now that Emma and I had officially started our life together. But I underestimated her. If anything, she got worse. It was little things at first. When Emma and I made plans, Stacy always seemed to be included. If I suggested a date night, Emma would suddenly remember that she had promised Stacy they'd do something together. If I brought up a restaurant I wanted to try, Stacy had already recommended another one, and Emma thought we should give it a shot. It was like we couldn't make a single decision without her input. I tried to be patient. I didn't want to be that guy, the husband who isolates his wife from her friends, so I kept my mouth shut longer than I should have. But patience only goes so far. One night, after yet another weekend where Stacy had inserted herself into our plans, I finally said something. Told Emma it felt like we were never alone, that maybe it was time to set some boundaries. She had looked at me like I'd suggested cutting off a limb. Stacy had been her best friend for over a decade. She didn't understand why this was such a big deal to me. She even accused me of not understanding how much Stacy had done for her. That was when I knew. Emma wasn't just defending Stacy. She was justifying her dependence on her. I could have pushed harder. Maybe I should have. But I told myself it wasn't worth another argument. I convinced myself that Emma would see it eventually, that one day she'd realize just how much control Stacy had over her life. I didn't know then that I was already losing her. The final straw came a year into our marriage on what should have been a quiet Friday night. I was in the kitchen, chopping onions for tacos, looking forward to a simple evening at home. Then the doorbell rang. Emma answered it, and within seconds I heard Stacy's wailing. I stepped into the living room just in time to see her clinging to Emma like she was drowning. Mascara streaked down her face, a duffel bag hung off her shoulder, and she sobbed about how he had left her, how she had nowhere to go. I didn't need to ask who he was. She collapsed onto our couch, rambling about how blindsided she was, how she had done everything for him, how she didn't deserve this. Emma held her hand, nodding along sympathetically, while I stood there, knife still in hand, wondering how this had suddenly become my problem. It didn't take long before Emma asked if Stacy could stay with us for a few days, just until she got back on her feet. I could already see where this was going. I wanted to say no. I should have said no, but I knew how it would look, turning away Emma's devastated best friend while she was in tears. So I forced a smile and said it was fine. At first, I told myself it was temporary, a few days, maybe a week. But Stacy had never been good at boundaries. She took over the guest room, turning it into a disaster zone. Clothes scattered everywhere, dirty dishes piling up, random shopping bags shoved into corners. It was like a teenager had moved in. The living room wasn't safe either. She stretched out on the couch, binge-watching reality shows at full volume, snacks spread across the coffee table. Twice I came home from work to find her still in her pajamas, eating straight out of a family-sized chip bag like she had no plans to move anytime soon. She wasn't staying with us. She was living with us. I tried to bring it up gently, reminding Emma that Stacy had been here for over 2 weeks now. Emma looked torn, but she told me Stacy just needed a little more time. I repeated her words back to myself every time I walked into the kitchen and found a sink full of unwashed dishes. Every time I had to step over another pile of Stacy's things in the hallway. Every time she made some offhand remark about how different Emma seemed since getting married. One night I had finally had enough. I told Emma it was time for Stacy to go. She wasn't just staying with us. She was taking over. Emma hesitated but agreed to talk to her. The conversation didn't go well. Stacy played the victim effortlessly, her eyes welling up with tears as she gasped that she never realized she was such a burden, that she didn't mean to be in the way. Emma rushed to reassure her, saying it wasn't like that we just wanted to make sure she was okay. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was fighting a battle I'd already lost. It took another week before Stacy finally left. When she packed up her things and walked out the door, she shot me a look, one that sent a chill through me. A look that said, "This isn't over." And I believed her. The house felt lighter after Stacy left. For the first time in weeks, I could sit in my own living room without hearing reality TV blaring or stepping over someone else's mess. I thought maybe, just maybe, things would start going back to normal. But if there was one thing I had learned, it was that Stacy never truly left. At first, it was little things. Emma would get texts at all hours, her phone lighting up constantly with Stacy's dramatic updates. How she was struggling, how she felt so alone, how hard it was to start over. Emma ate it up, comforting her, reassuring her, making plans to check in on her. Every conversation we had somehow circled back to Stacy. If I asked Emma how her day was, she'd sigh and say something about how Stacy was barely holding it together. If I suggested a date night, she'd pause, thinking about whether Stacy needed her. It was exhausting. I told myself to be patient. This was just a rough patch, a transition. Eventually, Stacy would move on, find someone else to cling to. I was wrong. A month after she left, I came home from work and found Emma sitting at the kitchen table, looking nervous. She wasn't just nervous, she looked guilty. The way she fiddled with her fingers, how she avoided my eyes, it set off alarms before she even opened her mouth. She wanted to talk. Stacy was having trouble adjusting. The apartment she moved into was too expensive, and she was struggling with bills. She had tried looking for a roommate, but nothing was working out. She didn't know what to do. And then, almost as if the idea had just occurred to her, Emma suggested that maybe, just maybe, Stacy could stay with us again. Just temporarily. Just until she got back on her feet. I felt my jaw tighten. The last time she stayed, it had been weeks before we could get her out. She had turned our house into her personal crash pad. She had walked around like she belonged there, and now she wanted back in. I told Emma no. This time I wasn't budging. Emma looked genuinely upset, like she couldn't believe I was saying no. Stacy was her best friend, and best friends didn't abandon each other. How could I be so heartless? How could I turn my back on someone who had been there for her through everything? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about Stacy anymore. This was about Emma, about the fact that she cared more about Stacy's comfort than about my boundaries, my sanity. For the first time since getting married, I wondered if we had made a mistake. That night, things were tense. Emma barely spoke to me, her silence heavy, like she was punishing me for saying no. The next few days were no better. Every time she looked at her phone, I could tell she was talking to Stacy. Whispered calls, long text messages, her mood shifting from frustration to guilt to something close to resentment. I could feel her slipping away. A week later, I came home and immediately knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet. Emma was sitting on the couch, her hands clenched together in her lap, her eyes red like she had been crying. She had made a decision. She told me Stacy had nowhere else to go, that she had already told her she could move in, that she needed to be there for her. It wasn't a request. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma had made the choice without me. She had invited Stacy back into our home like my opinion didn't matter. I told her if Stacy moved in, I wouldn't stay. Emma looked at me like I had slapped her. She told me I was being unfair, that I was making her choose between me and her best friend. But that was the thing. I wasn't the one making her choose. Stacy had done that the moment she turned our marriage into a battleground. The silence stretched between us. I saw it in Emma's face then. The conflict, the hesitation, the moment where she could have pulled back, could have realized what she was doing. But then her phone buzzed, and I knew. She had already chosen. I walked out. I spent the night at a hotel, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. I had fought so hard for this marriage, for Emma, for us, but it had never been a fair fight. Stacy had been there from the beginning, a constant force pulling at Emma, reshaping our relationship into something that was never just ours. The next morning, I sent Emma a text. I told her I wasn't coming back. A few hours later, she responded. She thought it was best if we took some time apart. That was it. No fight, no attempt to fix things, just a quiet confirmation of what I'd already known. She had made her choice. And for the first time in a long time, I finally made mine. Update 1. The lie that broke everything. 2 months passed. 2 long, exhausting months where I tried to rebuild my life while Emma played house with Stacy. I moved into an apartment across town, took back control of my space, and tried to focus on work, on friends, on anything that wasn't the wreckage of my marriage. Emma and I barely spoke. The divorce was inevitable, but neither of us had started the paperwork. Maybe she was waiting for me to come crawling back. Maybe she thought time would change my mind. It wouldn't. Then one day, out of nowhere, she texted me. She wanted to talk. I hesitated before agreeing. We met at a coffee shop, and the moment I saw her, I knew something was wrong. She looked wrecked, like she hadn't been sleeping, her usual confidence stripped away. She had found out the truth. Stacy had lied. One of their mutual friends had come forward, someone who had been close to Stacy for years. She had shown Emma messages, proof that Stacy had deliberately sabotaged our marriage. She had never needed a place to stay. She had never been struggling. She had manipulated Emma, played on her emotions, pushed her into choosing her over me. Emma sat across from me, her voice barely above a whisper as she told me everything. The way Stacy had bragged about how easy it had been, how she had made up lies about me to turn Emma against me, how she had even said, I did her a favor. She would have been miserable married to him. Emma was crying now, her hands shaking as she apologized. She told me she had been blind, that she had let Stacy control her, that she had ruined everything. She wanted to fix it. She wanted us back. I let her words sink in. For a long time, I had dreamed of this moment, the moment she would realize what she had done, the moment she would see the truth. But now that it was here, I felt nothing. She had believed Stacy so easily. She had thrown away our marriage without hesitation. And now that she had lost everything, now she wanted to come back? I looked at her, really looked at her. Then I told her no. I got up and walked away. I never looked back. Emma didn't take my rejection well. At first, she sat there in stunned silence, staring at me like she couldn't believe what I had just said. Then the tears started again, slow at first, then shaking sobs that made her shoulders heave. But it didn't change anything. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I just felt done. The moment she had chosen Stacy over me, our marriage had ended. This conversation was just a formality. She tried to reason with me, saying she had been manipulated, that she hadn't realized what Stacy was doing. She begged for another chance, saying she would cut Stacy off, go to therapy, do whatever it took. But the problem wasn't just Stacy. It was the fact that she had been so willing to believe the worst about me, that she had never once stopped to question if maybe, just maybe, I had been telling the truth all along. That wasn't something I could fix. That wasn't something I even wanted to fix. I told her I'd send over the divorce papers. Then I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her sitting there, crying into her hands. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Emma sent text after text, long messages filled with apologies, explanations, desperate pleas for me to reconsider. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Then she started showing up at my apartment. The first time, she knocked softly, waiting, hoping I would let her in. I didn't. After a few minutes, she left. The second time, she pounded on the door, her voice shaking as she begged me to talk to her. I still didn't open it. I had already spent too much of my life trying to convince her to trust me. I wasn't about to waste another second. Word spread quickly about what had happened. Our mutual friends, the ones who had distanced themselves when Stacy's lies had first taken hold, started reaching out. They wanted to apologize, to make amends, to say they had been wrong. I ignored most of them. People love a good redemption story, but I wasn't interested in giving them one. If they had been so quick to believe Stacy's version of events, then they weren't people I needed in my life. But Stacy? She wasn't done. Now that Emma had cut her off, Stacy had turned her anger on me. She started spreading new rumors saying I had manipulated Emma into leaving her, that I had brainwashed her, that I was the real problem all along. She went on social media rants about betrayal, about fake people, about how some men just couldn't handle a strong woman like her. She was unraveling. At first, I ignored it. But then one day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was her job. Someone, one of her coworkers maybe, had forwarded Stacy's unhinged social media posts to her boss. The things she had said, the way she had publicly trashed not just me but several other people in her life, had finally caught up to her. She had been fired. I should have felt bad, but I didn't. Somewhere, deep down, I think she had always believed she was untouchable, that she could manipulate, destroy, and control without consequences, that people would always take her side. But people like Stacy always push too far. Eventually, they dig their own graves. Emma, on the other hand, was still trying to rebuild her life. She had moved back in with her parents after everything fell apart. From what I heard, her mother was furious with her, constantly reminding her of how easily she had thrown away her marriage. Friends were distant, wary of getting too close to her after seeing how quickly she had turned on me. She was alone. And I wish I could say that gave me some kind of satisfaction, but the truth was, I just didn't care anymore. I had wasted too much time looking backward. It was time to move forward. Update 2. The truth comes out. Months passed. I built a new routine, a life without the constant weight of someone else's judgment. It was strange at first, coming home to a quiet apartment, making plans without having to check in with someone else, but I liked it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Then one evening, I ran into Marissa again. She was the one who had first come forward with proof of Stacy's lies, the one who had sent me those damning screenshots that had finally made Emma see the truth. We were both waiting in line at a coffee shop when she spotted me. She hesitated for a second, then smiled. She asked if I had heard the latest. I hadn't. Apparently, Emma had tried to reach out to Stacy, hoping to make amends. I nearly laughed at that. After everything that had happened, after all the ways Stacy had destroyed her life, Emma still wanted to fix things? Marissa nodded, looking just as baffled as I felt. But it hadn't gone the way Emma expected. Instead of an apology, Stacy had laughed in her face. She had called Emma pathetic, told her she was better off without her, and then, just to twist the knife, she had mocked her for losing her marriage over something so stupid. Emma had walked away in tears. That was the moment it finally sank in for her. She had destroyed everything for someone who had never cared about her in the first place. Marissa shook her head, saying she didn't know what was more pathetic, Emma still trying to make peace with Stacy, or the fact that Stacy had moved on without a second thought. I just shrugged. It didn't matter to me anymore. I had spent so much time waiting for justice, for karma, for something to come along and make things right. But now that it had finally happened, I realized I didn't need any of it. Emma and Stacy had ruined their own lives. And I was free. The weight was gone. That was the first thing I noticed in the months that followed. I'd spent so much time fighting battles I never should have been in, trying to prove my worth to someone who had never truly valued it. But now, without the constant stress of Stacy's manipulation or Emma's indecision, life felt lighter. The divorce went through without much of a fight. Emma didn't contest anything. She signed the papers quickly, almost as if she was too ashamed to drag things out. She sent a final message after everything was settled, a long-winded apology about how she had let the wrong person influence her, how she wished she had seen things sooner, how she still loved me in some way. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because there was nothing left to say. She had made her choices. I had made mine. And at the end of it all, I didn't owe her closure. The people who had turned their backs on me during the fallout made half-hearted attempts to reconnect. Mutual friends, acquaintances, even a few of her family members who had once looked at me with judgment in their eyes were now awkwardly reaching out. Some apologized outright, saying they had been fooled just like Emma had. Others acted like nothing had happened, like they had never doubted me in the first place. I kept my circle small. The friends who had stuck by me, the ones who hadn't believed Stacy's lies from the start, those were the people I held on to. The rest? They had already shown me how easily they could be swayed. I had no interest in rebuilding bridges that never should have burned in the first place. Stacy, on the other hand, had officially become a social pariah. Her job was gone, her reputation ruined, and from what I heard, even the people who used to laugh at her drama were done with her. She had built her life on control, on manipulation, on making sure she was always the one pulling the strings. But people like that never last forever. Eventually, they burn every bridge, push too far, and find themselves completely alone. Emma had tried to move on, but from what little I knew, it wasn't going well. She had tried dating again, but her trust issues had made things complicated. Every time she started to get close to someone, she would pull back, terrified of making the same mistake. I couldn't bring myself to care. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. And being done? That was the best feeling in the world. Conclusion, the best revenge. One day, months later, I was sitting at a cafe, flipping through my phone, when a message popped up from an unknown number. It was Emma. She said she just wanted to check in to see how I was doing. I stared at the message for a long time, wondering what she was really looking for. Maybe she was hoping for another chance, some kind of reconciliation. Maybe she just wanted to ease her guilt. I never responded. Some people spend their whole lives chasing closure, thinking they need that final conversation, that last apology, that one thing to make sense of everything. I didn't. I had already won, not in a petty, vengeful way. Not because I wanted Emma or Stacy to suffer. I won because I walked away. Because I didn't let their mistakes define me. Because I built a life that was mine, free of manipulation, free of doubt, free of people who only saw me as an afterthought. And as I sat there, drinking my coffee, breathing in the crisp morning air, I realized something. The best revenge wasn't anger. It was happiness, and I had never been happier.